Meyer goes on to say that the lower middle class is fragile. Its belief system is singularly cohesive, though. A thick ideational cement fills the cracks in the structure of common economic interests. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure if that's true. Is that true? The lower middle class today, as we understand it, both independent and dependent white-collar professionals, are not cohered by a thick ideational cement. In fact, they seem to be in conflict between sections of what we would understand to be like the Mangos or, the kind of liberal progressive PMC and more, conservative, populist, lower middle class. Hello everyone, welcome to BungaCast, episode 501 of BungaCast. Recently celebrated our 500th episode. You should check that out if you haven't heard it yet. This is 501, and this is an episode of the BungaCast Reading Club. I'm going to start with a quote. That's a fallacy to say that we have transformed out of a manufacturing economy. The manufacturing sector has been a lifeblood. It's what built what we used to call the middle class in this country. I don't believe in the middle class. I just believe there's a working class and there are the rich. And if you're not an owner and you don't own the business and you don't make all the decisions and you don't have massive wealth, then you're a working class person. That was Shone from the United Auto Workers Union in the US, and might serve as a little bit of a planted seed for you to think of as we go through this episode here and indeed the next three after this, which deal with not the working class, not the upper class, but the middle class, or some section thereof. George.
Yeah, the problem of the middle is how we've constructed it. Class today, the problem of the middle. What is the political role of the middle classes today? So this is what we're discussing in this, the third semester, if you will, of the reading club, which is going to be directed by me.
No, you make it sound like some kind of actual serious college course, online college MOOC or something.
It is a kind of MOOC, right? We've had the three profs, as it were, each taking one semester, and now we're on to the third, and we welcome all our online, our massively online. That's what it stands for, right? Massively online course. So if you're massively online and you're joining us today, thank you for being with us. So just to repeat the blurb or the setup of this section. So despite being a central category in sociological theory and political analysis, much contemporary discussion of class gets little beyond superficial discussion of status markers or parental occupations. The abatement of class struggle between workers and owners has shone a light on the role of the middle classes. Beyond the resurgence of the debate around the much-maligned professional-managerial class, PMC, for those listeners who've never heard us discuss this before, what is the true role of the middle class in politics and society? Who rules today, and how would we go about answering that question? So what do I want to get out of this third section of the reading club? I guess to focus in on some discussions that we've had over the years of the podcast, particularly a question which has emerged a number of times about whether the PMC are a class or whether they're a group or stratum in society that for some reason or other doesn't reach the level of a class. And I myself have written quite a few things trying to answer these questions, including in Compact and Damage and Cafe American, and most recently in Sublation, trying to get at this question. Because my starting point is in my instinct that the middle classes are more important in politics than they used to be. And I'll leave it at that. There's a whole range of reasons, and we'll get into these and also what we mean by the middle class. So the reading today, which I will hold up a copy of for those of you who are watching this on video, although it's not the most visually exciting thing. It's just a printed out paper.
People know what black text on white paper look like.
Yeah, I'm just encouraging people to read things in paper. But so this is by Arno. and was recommended by Dan Evans, who's a friend of the pod. And I hadn't read this particular piece by Meyer before, but I was aware of him as a historian, and this particularly this book, The Persistence of the Old Regime, which has the central argument that the feudal and aristocratic nature of the European ruling class was not dislodged or faded away by the rise of industrialization and the capitalist bourgeoisie, but rather it remained, persisted and integrated itself into the new capitalist system. And this is in large or World War I and World War II are both symptoms of the attempts of this old feudal order to hold on to power and retain some measure of control over the state and the economy. And if you want a more general introduction to Meyer himself, there's a useful piece which we'll link to from the Verso Books blog, which includes this. One of Meyer's main themes throughout his oeuvre was the investigation of the nature of the ruling class, both under capitalism and that of the feudal aristocracy. For Meyer, the history of the ruling class is intimately connected to the structure of the state and foreign policy, and thereby to global politics. In Meyer's analytic, domestic conflicts, particularly those of class conflict and social pressures within the nation state, are the main elements impacting the decisions the ruling class makes in a given country regarding foreign policy. So, wanted to start, just to go to the readings, wanted to start with this piece, which is more of a historical overview, and then we've got later sections, the Jakubowski, which is more on the theory. We've got a global panorama from the Swedish sociologist Goran Thurborn, and then a deep dive into the American white-collar middle class and their history, their development, and their foibles, let's put it that way, in C. Wright Mills's white-collar book. So, the reading itself, and I've just got a few comments on this, and then I'll bring in my colleagues, my co-leaders of this year's reading club, is The Lower Middle Class as Historical Problem by Arno J. Meyer, which is from the Journal of Modern History from September 1975. And, just in case you haven't read this, listener, starts by noting the complexity of the lower middle class and also the relative lack of attention that it's received. So he says, the lower middle class is a complex and unstable social, political and cultural compound that deserves close and systematic analysis. No doubt it is far more than the mere sum of its many and changeable elements, and appears to be far more polymorphous and tangled than the landed aristocracy, the peasantry, the bourgeoisie, or the working class. That's an interesting starting point, I think, anyway, just to say that we're dealing with potentially a more tangled, a more complex entity than any of the big classes. This is a class which maybe has been, to extend the metaphor, at the back of the classroom and has received relatively less attention from the teacher. I won't continue that because I think that's not getting non-verbal signs of support from Phil in particular. So Meyer also notes that 20th century social scientists tended to be from the low middle class, and to see it as either being moved towards proletarianization or embourgeoisement, but instead argues that we should take this lower middle class as a subject of study independent of other classes. And I think this is a really important point, just to situate this, and we'll come back to this over the course of the discussion, listener. But he argues that the low middle class has, quote, no apparent class consciousness, but it does have a, quote, sharply defined class awareness. So what the difference between those two is, what that means, I think that's obviously something which we'll get into, but I did just want to load that up front. And I think it's also fair, or also useful to say that Meyer uses the terms low middle class and petty bourgeoisie interchangeably. There's a few other terms there, and we'll come back to what our kind of preferred term is, because if nothing else out of this discussion, it would be good for us to start using, to all agree this is the term that we're going to use, this is the best term, all other terms are rubbish, and to really come down like a ton of bricks on anybody using the wrong word for something, to really police that particular boundary and enforce that. So to kick things off then, a lot of this article goes through the history of the low middle class, and we'll get to some of the questions of definition and the kind of political implications. But I think this would be useful for us to the three of us, just to outline a little bit and to tease out for listeners, because Meyer identifies the historical starting point of the low middle class not in the classical world, but in the new men of late medieval and early modern times who proceeded to found and settle in commercial, manufacturing, ecclesiastic or bureaucratic towns. Two questions on this. And one of them might be a question that I ask and then answer myself. If you've read Wolf Hall, did anything about my description on page 412, which you can go to, remind you of Thomas Cromwell? So is he the sort of new man that we're talking about here?
Hello friends, you've reached the end of a sample from an episode only available to subscribers. We put out 2 episodes a month for free. For access to the rest in its entirety, please join us at patreon.com/bungacast. For $7 a month, subscribers receive original, exclusive episodes with the entirety of the BungaCast cast. That's George Hoare, myself Alex Hochuli, and our contributing editors, Philip Cunliffe, Amber Lee Frost, Catherine Liu, Lee Jones, Alex Gurevich, and Lee Phillips. We've got extended interviews with guests, episodes on current affairs, and original episodes on theory, history, and culture, so as to understand the crises of our times. We also have the BungaCast Reading Club, where Phil, George, and myself present the key books and essays necessary for understanding the world today, how we got here, and where we might be going. Subscribers also get a digital subscription to Damage magazine, with whom we're partnered, and you can find all this info at patreon.com/bungacast. We do hope you'll join us. These are turbulent times, and ideologically confused ones as well. What we try to do is find political clarity, to move beyond the decadent age of Bunga Bunga.